Welcome to our series on conversion rate basics. I'm Nicholas Wright from Conversion Rate Pros, and what we do at Conversion Rate Pros is we help our clients get more customers from their website, and we do this through the application of conversion rate principles to their websites. And so what we love more than anything is to provide not just our clients but people from around the world with information and an understanding of the basics of conversion rate optimization to help them improve their websites and ultimately the experience for their customers. Today we're going to be looking at something known as false bottoms, and what we'll cover is what are false bottoms, how to spot them on your own website, and what you can do to minimize the number of false bottoms that you have on your website and ultimately move forward key metrics such as your average time on page, your bounce rate. These are the micro conversions that if you improve those core engagement metrics, you can ultimately see your conversion rate move forward as well. And so we're going to be looking at a couple of different examples of websites that do have false bottoms, just to give you a clear understanding of what they look like. And this ultimately will help you spot false bottoms on your own website. And then we'll look at some examples of websites that don't have false bottoms and that do effectively overcome this hurdle and drive higher engagement as a result. So we're going to start off with an explanation just of what false bottoms are. And in order to understand false bottoms, you need to understand the fold. This terminology that people in web design often use. This terminology comes from the newspapers. And so if you pick up a newspaper, you'll see that a newspaper is generally folded in half. And so half of the content of the home pages or of the front page of the newspaper is immediately visible. And in order to see the rest of the newspaper, you need to unfold it to see what is below the fold. This terminology was brought across to websites. Above the fold is everything that you can immediately see on a website without scrolling at all. So you can see that the fold of our website is sitting here just below the subscribe to our newsletter section of our home page. And everything that we can see currently on our screen without scrolling is above the fold. And everything that we can see as we start scrolling is below the fold. So it's a very simple concept, but it's quite a powerful breakpoint on websites that, if not used effectively, can reduce user engagement and can ultimately be the difference between how much time a user spends on your website. Important also to know that folds exist all the way through a page, not just at the top of every page. So if I scroll a little bit further down to about that point, you can now see that there's a new fold at the bottom here and a new breakpoint and a new opportunity to either drive users further down the page or not. And so at any point where all of the content sits squarely within a fold or a section of the page, you have got a fold at the bottom here and an above the fold and a below the fold. We're going to look at some examples of websites that effectively use the fold and some that don't. We're going to start with Atlas Obscura. This is a random article that we found about female mariachi band players, and this is a great example of the top of a page that does not effectively drive the user down the page because of a false bottom. And as the name suggests, a false bottom is simply a fold of a web page that effectively looks like the bottom of that page. If you've read Tim Ash's book on landing page optimization, you will know that we have these three mental systems that impact the way that we surf the web. And the psychological response that we are trying to inspire in our users is one of curiosity and interest. When you have a false bottom like this, even though we conventionally do understand that there should be more content if I scroll down, there's nothing on the page or near the bottom of this page that is immediately piquing my interest, driving my curiosity, and encouraging me to continue scrolling down this page. And so that's the danger of a false bottom, is essentially we are not encouraging our users through an immediate visual cue to continually move down the page. You can see if we do actually scroll a little bit here, there's a beautiful title here that really could be used as a interest piquing tool on this page, but it's completely hidden from me as I land here. And actually what you'll notice is that your eyes are drawn up to the navigation here, and you may be more inclined to use the navigation and hop onto a different story than you are to actually pull down on this page and start reading the article that you've come to, or potentially just leave. And that's what we want to try and avoid. So for this page in particular, what I would have suggested is that become the fold, that you essentially provide users with a little bit of actual context and information and invite them down the page. If this article is indeed something I'm interested in reading, then when I read that headline, it's going to pique my interest, it's going to draw me down the page if that is something that I find interesting, to actually go carry on and read the article on this page. There are two primary ways that we can, as web designers or marketing managers, overcome this hurdle. The first option is just simply to reduce the size, either through cropping or just reducing the overall size of these images that are above the fold. If you can imagine this navigation kind of coming down with us as we scroll, if you had the page sitting like that and potentially just reduced the size of this image or cropped it a little bit at the bottom, and you still have your navigation there with the image sitting kind of in this space here and this visible as I land on this page, that is going to, I would assume, and often we see this when we run A/B tests for our clients, vastly increase the time on page, the pages per session, and reduce the bounce rates because it draws the user down the page and encourages that kind of engagement. So let's go to an example of a page that does not have a false bottom, and that looks like this. So I've just hopped onto BuzzFeed's homepage here. What you can see is that the fold has content from below the fold bleeding onto the above the fold section. So you can see that there's an incomplete picture here. And for any of you web designers that have done Gestalt psychology, you'll know that as humans we have a desire for closure. And so if you see half an image, there's quite a strong base psychological urge to see the complete picture, or if you see half a sentence, to see the full sentence. And these are all small tactics that you can use to draw your users down the page and keep them scrolling until they find something that really interests them and click through to the next article. And these drive forward those core metrics of time on page and pages per session. So that's a really great example of where the home page of a website pulls you down by ensuring that you are immediately aware of the fact that this is not the bottom of the page, but actually there is more content below the fold. And if we go back now here, you can immediately see the difference between those two websites, where on this page I'm not immediately aware of the fact, without having to apply conventional or historical knowledge to the situation, that there is indeed something below the fold. And so that's how you overcome a false bottom, is essentially just pulling up some of the images or some of the content from below the fold so that the user is drawn further down the page. Here's another great example of not having a false bottom, and it comes from the Matador Network. It's actually a really great article on where 48 of your favorite TV homes were actually filmed. What you can see here is that the primary infographic sits above the fold, but it continues down below the fold. And so what that would immediately, if I were to be interested in this infographic and would want to see the whole infographic, I would by nature need to scroll down on this page to see the rest of the information. And as I do that, you can see that as I'm scrolling down, that there's some more information. There's a small box here, there's an icon here as I'm doing that, and then I hit the article. This is if you wanted to take it a step further in terms of folds, is scroll naturally through your pages and ensure that at every juncture, at every natural scroll point, there is more a new content, kind of glossy and exciting content pulling up into the fold that continually encourages your users to scroll down the page. And this is a great example of that. I'm interested in this infographic. I want to see more of the infographic, so I scroll, and as I do that, I see more information and I scroll, and I hit the article, the running joke, and it pulls me into the article here, and I would therefore be more inclined to read this article than this one where there's nothing immediately drawing me further down the page. Now, as with many things in life, for every rule there is an exception, and there is indeed an exception to the false bottom rule. And this is one of the reasons why we as an agency never recommend the blind application of best practices to our clients. We always recommend testing and ensuring that the principles that you are applying are backed by your research, as well as the sources of data or the sources of traffic for your web pages. And so there is one example where we have found that false bottoms can actually be used as a powerful tool. And this is particularly found with paid traffic or paid campaigns where you've got a single action that you want the user to take. You'll see that the three examples we looked at in terms of false bottoms are all content-based sites, article pages, where the primary metrics that publishers like BuzzFeed are usually striving for are things like pages per session and bounce rate and time on page. In some instances, a low time on page can actually be a good thing because it means that you're convincing the user to take the desired action really quickly and your page is really effective. And so an example of where a false bottom can be used effectively is where you have a paid for landing page or a paid campaign driving to a landing page where you have a single journey that's mapped out for the user. So we see an example of this, a great example of this from Ozo, which is a secure payment provider. And here you can immediately see, because of the design and the layout of the page, that the primary action that this website wants you to take is to click that register now button. They're more interested in getting you to click the register now button than they are in getting you to scroll further down the page. You can see that there is information below the fold, and if you do happen to scroll, they'll continue driving things like credibility. But essentially, the primary objective that they are driving for here is for you to click this big register now button. So it is incredibly important that you test per source whether or not your pages are benefiting from or suffering from false bottoms, because both could be possible. Thanks for joining our first session on conversion rate basics. We will be uploading more videos like these, so please check back on our site, and we hope that you have found some useful information during this session. What we recommend is that with this fresh in your mind, you go back to your website, flip through your critical core pages, and get a sense for how many false bottoms you have on your website, and start mapping these tests to reduce that size of the content above the fold, or removing potentially some elements that are sitting above the fold that aren't necessarily important, to see what happens when you bring some of that content up and encourage the user to scroll down. And if you get some good wins from applying this basic principle, please let us know. Thanks very much for joining.